Ben Wightwick, my friend, welcome to People in Legal.
Hello, mate. How are you? You well?
Very good, very, very good. I think I missed you last time I was in London. That was probably my doing, but bit of a busy trip. But looking forward to coming down to Australia again pretty soon.
Well, I'd love to come to Australia. I just need to get that first client, First client down in Australia will be good for Autologics. So that would be a
Uh,
good excuse to come down.
okay, so all
Ye-
listeners that are actually law firms or corporate counsel that are actually wanting to use Autologics or wanting the wonderful Ben Wightwick to come and visit you.
Yeah.
Um, please open the welcome mats and create an excuse for Ben to come down to Australia so we could actually have a few beers.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So Ben, you're the Chief Commercial Officer at Autologics.
That's correct. Yep. Yep.
Yep. And I guess you want to tell us a bit about Autologics, what you're doing currently, and yeah, we'll dive into your career story.
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Autologics for coming up to 2.5 years, 2.5 years. And we're a workflow automation platform, a process orchestration platform, really. So thinking about how you need to get from A to B, and you need to track all of the component parts. A lot of technologies out there say they have workflow, and they do, but it's very linear in nature. We're a proper platform that's really focused on helping firms drive efficiency and productivity gains, and ultimately profitability, because it's really about how do you take an existing process, how do you refine it, how do you re-engineer it in some cases, how do you orchestrate the um, integrations that are required, because typically no technology is an island these days, so you have to be able to integrate with things like Salesforce, iManage, DocuSign at a drop of a hat. It shouldn't be technical. So we've tried to make it really easy for firms to be able to sort of incorporate third-party tools into the process orchestration, and really thinking about how ultimately you can solve one of two things. It's either some kind of operational excellence or efficiency, so internal processes, and then thinking about the practice. Ultimately, for our law firm clients, which is the predominant sort of area that we operate in, it's thinking about how do you make lawyers' lives easy? How do you take the sort of what do I do next away from them and sort of present a sort of a standardized playbook of here's the next task, or here's the output from that process, or a client has done this, here's the next thing you should do. So we're really trying to focus in and double down on that kind of environment and focus on the productivity and efficiency gains, really. And that's a big part of where we are and what we're doing.
So, what are the areas in a practice where you're getting the biggest wins? Like, what kind of processes or areas of law are you getting the biggest wins in?
Oh, well, I mean, process end-to-end pro. So this is where it starts to get really interesting. Sort of a simple workflow, creating a task when you do something with a document. Almost all practice areas, all work types have got that kind of thing, but it's a one and done kind of scenario. We specialize in where there is maybe a 25-step process, and you need to track and audit it and make sure that it's being done, and it makes sure that there's not sort of bottlenecks in the resource and everything else. So a really well understood process, a really well defined one. So we tend to operate really well where there's maybe volume, or a standardized playbook. So it's sort of a sort of a low margin kind of high volume kind of scenario. But equally, we've got clients who are doing one-off processes, but the volume is big. So really complex things like contract remediation, transaction remediation. So you're getting a large data set, sort of sometimes up to 250,000 entities, whether it be documents or transactions or items. And then having to do something with it as a firm. So triage it, make sure, maybe run it through an NLP extraction service, then do an assessment, then do a triage, then sort of review things and go through stages of reviews. And ultimately, it's all about sort of creating that transparency for the end client and for the team that's working on it, and really trying to work out how you do it. Typically, those types of projects are run through Excel spreadsheets and Word documents, and so things that aren't really designed, unless you know really what you're doing, to be able to track and manage, and really importantly, audit what's happened, by whom, and when, and really sort of drive that back. So we operate really nicely and really well inside of real estate teams, inside of financial services, so loans and loan agreements and reviews of those types of things. So yeah, pretty much across the board. But ultimately, it's where you need a system of record, you need to orchestrate the process, and then you need to do it and sort of deliver that sort of legal work.
So it could be a situation where there's an acquisition of a company, and there's a whole bunch of new employment contracts that are sent out, or new agreements are sent out to things, and you've got a whole framework of rules and a framework of workflows you could put in place.
Yeah, that kind of flexible business logic. So typically our customers will work with their customer, whether it be a bank or another corporate, and go, right, here are the rules that govern these things. Tell us what we've got. Tell us where we are. Tell us what's in here. Do that assessment. Do that DD, and provide us daily, weekly, whatever kind of reporting. But it's all about sort of building out that business logic, orchestrating that business logic, and then sort of taking out the exceptions. So not having to do work and then having to write it off, which is classically the kind of world where you do on a paper format, you'd go, right, 10 associates, go and do this stuff. They'd go off and do their stuff and they'd come back and report on it. And what you'd find is the second thing that the second associate had done, or the PSL or whomever, had a red flag in it. And as soon as you've got that red flag, everyone should have stopped, really, because they need to go and speak to the client. But ultimately, what they could have done is work for a day or whatever, and perhaps have to write off that whole time because on sort of section item 2, they've identified something, but they didn't really recognize it, or they didn't report it up, or they didn't do anything. So it's really starting to think about how do you work smarter, and really sort of focus in on it. But it does require, oftentimes, it does require a recognized sort of drive towards efficiency, sometimes from a cost pressure from a client, sometimes from an understanding that a client's expecting them to work that way, but really starting to think about, okay, well, what's the standardized playbook? How can we orchestrate that? How can we manage that? And what does that look like? And how do we use a technology that's been designed to do that, rather than a technology or technologies that can do it, but ultimately sort of struggle because they weren't designed to do it?
That's interesting. So, I mean, conceivably, like a law firm could actually, this could be a technology a law firm could actually consult on to their clients.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got clients that do that.
And in fact, they're probably like, it's probably a great business development tool, and probably also a way of actually building another revenue stream as well.
We've got clients that build products on top of our technology that is driving new business opportunities. We've got a client in Canada, who and they've effectively got a new law arm to their existing law firm, and that new law arm, they've got 3 departments that are running all of their transactions and processes and work product through our technology. But it's marketed. It's not. I mean, nobody knows it's us that's driving all of their processes and everything else, but that's what's happening inside of that firm, and they're going great guns. They're looking at now division 4. So they've got 3 divisions or 3 products up and running, one of which is client facing, 2 of which are actually driving the internal work type and work product for those teams. So yeah, it's you can think of it as an opportunity to sort of present a new way of doing something to a client, to act as a trigger for a BD engagement as part of your pitch, and or it can be the thing that's driving the new business sort of product service that you're operating on, because we provide all of the sort of audit backlog and trail, so that you can track and provide all the detailed analysis, MI, BI kind of information that you'll need as a business, but also your clients would want as a sort of a reporting tool. So,
yeah, pretty amazing. I mean, we'll get back into Autologics, I guess, later on as we chat. But mate, you've got a pretty interesting career story.
let's find out at the end. Let's find out.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't know.
so
It might be. It conceivably could be. Depends how much I embellish it. Let's see. Let's see.
well, give us the moderate version.
Um. Okay. So I I think I've never known what I wanted to be when I grew up. Never. And I've never really had. I'm not like Liam Neeson. I don't have a set of skills that I can put to use. And so I sort of bumbled around a bit. I openly dropped out of university after sort of 15, 18 months. It wasn't for me, although it was for me. I just didn't recognize it was for me, if that makes sense. I was too busy in the bar, basically, and not doing what I was there to do. Don't do that, kids. Don't do that. Um, but I sort of didn't really know, but I think at the time I was bumbling around. I didn't want to go home. I then thought to myself, okay, what am I sort of good at? I'm sort of good at drinking, and I'm sort of good at spending time with people. I should go work in a pub. So I did that. And I went and worked in a pub called the Pharaoh and Firkin, just over Putney Bridge in London. And I met a group of Aussies and Kiwis and South Africans who were all working there. And they became my family, really, for about on and off for about 10 years. And this was back in 1996-ish, roughly.
Wow.
So back in 96, I was sort of working in a pub. I quickly realized I was quite good at sort of interacting with customers and working with customers, remembering what customers wanted, going that extra sort of without having any formal training, because you're just pulling pints really and serving food. You sort of start to realize what makes a difference to a customer's day. And you start to go, okay, well, if I remember what they drank last time, then I can have it ready for them as they walk through the door, or I can do something else. And I started to think about how can we operate at a different level that isn't just pulling pints, that isn't just serving a roast dinner on a Sunday, and what does that look like? So back in my brain, I was already formulating and refining what I sort of thought I might want to be when I grow up, but I still had no idea. And so, yeah, I did the pub game for what, 3 years. I was sort of became assistant manager of a different pub very quickly. So I had responsibilities. I was managing teams informally, really, but managing teams, organizing stuff, setting up rotors, coordinating stuff, and thinking, okay, well, I'm sort of 19, 20. I'm thinking about what I want to be when I grow up without really thinking about it, and just honing in on those things that in a pub game are important, but also they're translatable skills, in terms of how you communicate with your team. How do you get the best out of them when it's busy and you're a bit rushed? How do you sort of get that extra 5% from the people that you're working with? How do you make your standards don't drop and all that sort of stuff? So you start to think about all of this sort of stuff, and it's the pub game. It's important to the big breweries that own the pubs and everything else, but ultimately it's not life or death. So you're having fun at the same time, and you're sort of making friends. Actually met my wife. I employed my wife actually back in 1996,
Wow.
97. She wasn't my wife then, but she is now. And so, yeah, I was doing sort of 70, 80 hours a week. I was living upstairs. I was doing shifts in the kitchen. I was running the downstairs when I needed to. And yeah, I was sort of loving it, but I knew it became all consuming. If I wasn't working, I was with people from the pub. If I was with people from the pub, I was probably having a drink or two off hours and stuff like that. But you were doing 70, 75, 80-hour weeks. So everything would be unsociable. You'd probably have one day off a week. You'd then have a few mornings off or a few evenings off. But ultimately, it would be you would have no off or switch off, especially because I lived above the pub. And that created tensions ultimately. And after a few years, my wife Sarah, she was at university at the time, so she had her own life. She had her own friends doing her own stuff. But ultimately, when we could see each other, I probably couldn't because I was working, and that sort of created a sort of gap. So she told me to get a proper job. Proper job. Commandment number one, or probably
A
1,000
proper
by that
job.
time. But she said you should think about getting a proper job. You should start to think about it. And so yeah, I worked. I sort of got a job in a company called Kelly Services, a recruitment company, and I found a new family. Basically, I found a new bunch of people to work with and play with. I did a whole bunch of stuff for them. I started in their time card entry room. So this goes back
Wow.
to sort of 1998. So they would process, I don't know, 30,000 time cards a week of candidates sort of hours. And they would get processed by the branch. They would come in, then there'd be queries. So we would sit there in a room and we'd manage manually all the queries for all of the time cards. And it would be like, go and find time card from 1995, December the 2nd, whatever, for Bob Harris.
Goodness.
And you'd have a system and it would all be on microfiche. So you'd be scanning sort of a single acetate, this sort of size with 1,000 time cards on it. And literally sort of bonkers, but it's like, it was one of the things. So I quickly stopped doing that. I went and worked in the, in the customer team. So doing, I think I did that for 4 or 5 months. Then I went to a customer team. So handling inquiries and stuff like that. Then I went into IT, and I was doing sort of first line, second line sort of IT sort of support, and got sort of interested in technology. I had no idea about technology. I think just as I left uni, it was the time when sort of the university had just invested in some computers, so all the boys were in there sort of sending emails to each other going, wow, this is amazing, type thing. Instead of being out playing football or going to the bar. Anyway, I didn't quite understand it. So, but it was lost on me for like 4 or 5 years. And then I came in and I was working in the IT team at Kelly Services. So I'd done, and this is a bit of a theme, I'd done 5 different jobs at Kelly Services in 5 years, basically,
Wow.
roughly. And I'd gone from department to department, learning, understanding, honing, refining, thinking about, but without really thinking I was doing it. I wasn't proactively thinking, I have to be the best person on this desk. I have to do this. I have to do that. I was just like, okay, well, surely there's a better way to do this, or surely there's something better here, or surely we could work in a slightly different way. Or if you weren't such a XYZ, surely we'd all have a better life, type thing. So I was always trying to look at ways that you could do stuff. And then again, commandment number 2, my wife, who was working for a legal publisher, so she graduated, she started working for a legal publisher. She said, you know what, you should go and work for a law firm, because they've always got budgets for technology, and you're always complaining that there isn't enough budget to spend on tech in the company you're in. There probably was, but that was just the way that I complained about things. And so I had one interview with a chap called Kevin Jones. Kevin Jones is still at CMS right now, today, sort of 8 o'clock in the morning. He'll probably be there. But I had an interview with Kevin, and I got the job on a first line support desk. First interview, didn't really think about it. Wasn't expecting to get it. First time commuting into London type thing. I'd gone into London. I was living in sort of the outskirts. And yeah, got an interview and got the job. And then I did 10 years at CMS, just over 10 years at CMS. Went through a whole bunch of changes, whole bunch of changes. So I came in at first line, then I did second line, then I did a BA PM role, and ultimately sort of left after sort of, again, probably doing 5 or 6 jobs over the course of the 10 years I was there. But I realized that there are opportunities. So opportunities inside of organizations to learn from other people, other teams, other departments. So I was really curious about this whole dynamic that seemed to exist between the lawyers and the professionals that sit outside of the actual legal teams. So your marketing, your knowledge, IT, and the divide between it, and the social construct and the cultural construct of what that sort of looked like. And I was really curious about trying to break those typical boundaries around who, what, how, sort of, just all of the sort of the things you hear about law firms. And that wasn't rife in CMS back in the day. It was a good place to work. It was really enjoyable. Obviously, you're going to get some numpties every now and again, but you get that in all organizations, regardless of the profession you're working in. But it was really good for me, actually. And it was one of those things that it was the first time I met you when I was at CMS.
I remember actually. I remember actually. I
Yeah.
think that was I think was it the fire station at Waterloo?
Fire station at Waterloo.
My
Again,
goodness
there's not a
me.
theme about my career, but that's another bar. So yes. But yeah, but sort of, I think again, to take a thread from the pub days, back in 96, 97, I was always good around people and pulling pints and everything else, but you'd sort of then learn on the job. I had terrible GCSE results, terrible A-level results, barely scraped enough to get into the university then I then dropped out of. So academically, I'm not what I should be or could be, but that's just a where I was at the time. So I just started to look at other ways to sort of grow and enhance. And I found that sort of human interaction, becoming allies, becoming sort of finding mechanisms to help people, and going maybe that a bit beyond. So starting to understand, okay, well, I've fixed that for somebody, but actually, how can I stop it from happening again? What can I do next? Or what is that? So you start to just meet people, get to know their sort of their quirks and their challenges. And that's my journey, is understanding sort of legal practice. I don't understand legal practice to the nth degree, but the human side of time, pressure, the dynamic, the culture is something that got ingrained in me relatively quickly when I was at CMS, and understanding the importance of sort of a 6-minute increment. I mean, if you can fix something in 1 minute, then they're not wasting 5 and they're not able to bill and everything else. So you start to think about, okay, well, you put yourself under a little bit of your own pressure to make sure that you're not wasting people's time, or you're being as efficient as possible. And yeah, it was really great. The last sort of couple of years, we did a whole desktop refresh. I then got involved in chatting to a whole bunch of vendors, including Docs Corp and yourselves, but also everything from iManage to, I mean, I basically was part of the team that sort of, I wasn't leading the team, but I was part of the team that was sort of choosing, evaluating the tech of the day to look at how we can then deploy that to, I think it was something like 2,500 users across mainland Europe and the UK. What did that do? And it again got me exposed to another part of the industry, which was all very sort of focused at sort of servicing the internal clients, but understanding the dynamic of vendors, and then starting to look at, okay, well, and it was really interesting actually how sort of buying technology is, and this is something that stuck with me for a long time. Buying technology is a commodity. There's probably three if you want document comparison, there's probably three vendors that were doing it at the time. You look at document management systems, there was 2 or 3 that were doing it at the time with any sort of note. And And ultimately, you sort of start to you look beyond the tech. The tech is the commodity, and you look beyond the tech. It's that the buying tech is often considered like you've got a checklist. Does it do this? Can it be hosted here? Can it this? And then ultimately it becomes a little bit about, and it increased. So initially it was about a little bit, a small percentage about who is trying to sell to me. Are they bellends? Are they just looking for a quick buck? Are they trying to build a relationship? How important am I to them? Not important am I, but how important is the business? How important is understanding? Are we creating a vendor client relationship, or are we building a partnership? Are we going to do something interesting? And that process really influenced what I now do with our clients. And it's sort of, not everyone's going to like me. That's just the way it is. But, you know, you try and become a likable person. You try and please people. You try and make sure that you're sort of transparent and open, and you build relationships. And relationships are really important in business. You don't want to
Totally agree.
You don't want to sit there and invoice them once a year, and that's your only engagement. You want to be chatting to them as often as you can, whether it be once a quarter, once a month, once a week. It doesn't really matter. I think that the important thing is that you're having those regular touch points, and you've got an open dialogue. And it isn't. I think one of the important things, and I don't do this enough, but I try to do this, is oftentimes people react to customer requests, whether it be support, whether it be a query, whether it be a new piece of functionality. Whereas I think the power and impact of an proactive outbound call or email to say, how are you? How's things going? Can we help? Type thing is really powerful. It's really important. And I think that we try and do that a little bit here at Autologics. We try and take some of those sort of learnings over the years that I've had and just put them into our standardized sort of way of operating. But I think it comes down to also hiring good people that believe in that sort of stuff too. If they don't, it's very obvious. If somebody doesn't believe in it, it comes across that. But if you recognize that, yeah, you're trying to go that one step above, then the feedback that we get is that our customers love it, and our customers sort of really appreciate it, and they do then start to think of us as partners rather than vendors. And I think that's come through years of learning, working in different industries with different things. Nothing quite like sharpening your teeth when you've got drunk people at 10:30 being obnoxious, and you're having to be polite and manage them, and sort of serve them and think about that. So you've got different things, people in front of you, and now in quite times of COVID and the technology that we've got, apart from big events and stuff like that, and one-to-ones, you don't really spend a lot of time face-to-face with your customers these days. And I think that creates a challenge, but ultimately it's an opportunity too, in terms of how people think and operate. And so, yeah, CMS was really groundbreaking for me, because I sort of, without really realizing it, I recognized a little bit more about what I wanted to be when I grew up. The subtext is I still don't really know what I want to be when I grow up, but you know, that's just the way it is. And so, yeah, finished off CMS being sort of lead PM BA for a whole bunch of stuff. And then I think it was the Christmas time of 2010, I think. And I went to Justin North's from Jandersdean, now Pickering Pierce. So I went to his famous Christmas drinks in a bar. Again, another common thread, in a bar in Smithfields. And I met for the first time AJ Patel and Stuart Barr of HiQ. And they'd been trying to sell to me for a while. In fact, it wasn't them; it was Vinay Shah was trying to sell to me for a while. But I had another product that, again, we built a relationship with, and I felt sort of honest and obliged, and sort of they'd done well by us, so we were sort of sticking by them. But I saw a really big opportunity for HiQ to be doing something really pretty awesome from a technology perspective, the breadth of opportunity, the breadth of capabilities, the different use cases you could solve with it. So I offered to become their janitor. I quite happily would empty bins, sort of dust, just do stuff so I could come and join them. And they basically laughed me away. And then about 6 months later, they gave me a call and said, you fancy a lunch? We should catch up. And I thought, okay, free lunch sounds good. I didn't sort of realize that the lunch was an interview, but it wasn't an interview. It was kind of a job offer. And so I joined HiQ in the October-ish, I think it was the October of 2011. And so, yeah, I did 10 years at HiQ. And that is, again, that was a really interesting place to work in terms of who and what and why. Loads of inspirational people, loads of mistakes that you can fix and right and sort of get sorted, different ways of implementing new strategies of things. How do you scale a sort of a SaaS business in legal? How do you do it effectively, efficiently? How do you do it with minimal disruption? How do you do it sort of keeping your customers, minimal churn, growing product, a whole bunch of stuff that sort of now is part of my back pocket. All of those experiences that I've brought into Autologics. And I think the common thread is that we the guys had already started doing it, but ultimately it was how we refined it. And we in the royal we, because it wasn't me, but it was we in the royal we, how we refined our client experiences and how we made and created a community surrounding the product. I remember our last HiQ forum before the TR acquisition, and it was like 400 people that had come in from sort of across Europe to come in and sort of spend the day with us, just to hear about the product and hear about. So we were building it's a small community, but we built a community of our own advocates, our own evangelists who really sort of saw the value of the product, and they pushed us to push on to do all the great stuff that we did. So yeah, it was a really, really great kind of environment and place to, again, further solidify what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Are you doing what you wanted to do when you're growing up? Have you grown up?
No, I'll never grow up. I'm like Peter Pan.
Not a terrible thing.
No. Well, I mean, I think I think the thing is that you sort of I build stuff around principles. I'm quite agile about where, what, how, who, and everything else. I think that the key thing around where I am now, and probably why I was at CMS for 10 years, and why I was at Kelly Services for 5 years, and why I was at HiQ for 10 years or so, is because you build relationships. You build relationships with your customers. You build relationships with your colleagues. You build weird relationships with the products that you build. You know what I mean? You become sort of, you look at something, because at HiQ I was part of the product team for, I don't know, 4 years of my time there. But I sort of ultimately, we were a product organization at heart, so everything revolved around the product. But you start to sort of believe in things, and it becomes an emotional attachment rather than a sort of a salary or a wage, if that makes sense. And I think that's one of the things that I've realized. If you can find that emotional attachment to your environment, to the customers, to the people, if you build those kind of relationships, you're sort of set, because you're not having that sort of Sunday night dread, because I mean, of course you do, and you have stressful weeks and you have things that you don't want to do, but the overarching feeling is that you're working for a good bunch of people, you're working with a good bunch of people, you've got good clients that typically sort of like what you do, um, engage with what you are and why you operate. And I think they're the things that you, when I want to, what I want to be when I grow up is sort of, it's almost like, it's a bit cheesy really, but you just want to be fulfilled. You want to be working in an environment that actually sort of you recognize emotionally as a thing. You're not just taking a paycheck, you're not just doing it for your salary, but of course you are, but there is something that sort of sits above it or below it or around it that feels something different. And if you can find that in an organization or a team or whatever, you often hear people say, I stayed for longer at that organization than I probably should have done, but because of who I was working with. Everyone finds that little niche or pocket, and I think that's sort of what I want to be when I grow up. I could be selling deck chairs by the hour on the beach, and I probably would sort of be fulfilled. You know what I mean? And I think that's the sort of thing that that's sort of what I want to be when I grow up. I've never actually thought that or said that, but there you go. You've teased it. It's like a sort of a counseling session. This is great. Thank you.
Look, my pleasure. The bill's in the mail. It'll be in some beers, some pints of beer. It's really fascinating, because I mean, what I love about your story, Ben, is that is just that grounding in the hospitality industry in the beginning. I think there's so many people can get. I mean, I've seen so many successful people in our industry where their beginnings are in that hospitality area. I mean, they've learned how to talk to people. They've learned how to actually deal with pressure situations. They've learned how to actually just do the basic things right. And there's no entitlement there. I mean, I think that's a really, really big issue. I think, and I'm going to get myself in trouble by saying this, but with there's some up and coming generation to a degree where I think, and it's not everywhere, but there's this, you know, digging in and doing a job like that and actually and putting your back into it. I think, it feels like for some folks it's more like the paycheck than it is about the emotional attachment about the
Yeah,
work environment.
of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, if you look at, well, I can speak firsthand, and he's not of work age yet, but I can speak of my 16-year-old kid. He literally wants to get paid for the job that he's been asked to do. He doesn't want to do anything else. He doesn't want to do anything extra. There's nothing. I mean, he's a good kid and he works hard when he's got little Saturday job type stuff. But in his head, he's like, my job description is this. That's all I'm going to do. Unless I'm going to get paid more for doing what I. So they've got. There's an entitlement. There's a very transactional kind of way of processing stuff.
It
And I don't
is.
know. I've not really thought about it, but you probably you can look at people who are. It's transactional. It's sort of, it's a bit more robotic, and I don't know. Like, you can't really blame COVID for that, because obviously, in the sense that technology allows us to do this sort of stuff from across the globe, but you do lose that kind of human connection with your team, with your work, with the meaning, with the corporate culture. Now you can push it out and you can get it out there, but you can also see why sort of firms are struggling, and why there is that kind of employee gap, because they don't feel like part of something. They are just on the end of a screen, and they don't have that sort of emotional connection to what you're doing and why you do it. I mean, they can do, and there will be people that do have that, but you can see why the younger culture coming into businesses now, just out of uni, whatever it might be, it's like, this isn't sort of what I signed up for. This is a bit weird, because typically you come out of uni or come out of your schooling, you're surrounded by people, you're surrounded by everything, and then you come into a sort of a hybrid or remote work environment, and then you're in a room by yourself, with the screen, you
Yep.
go, oh, this is a bit different. And so
Yeah.
you then attach more closely to your personal friends rather than your work friends. And I think that's the challenge. That's the challenge that I see, is that without, in this current environment, and it's changing in this current, I probably wouldn't have the friends that I've got. I've made friends in all of the companies I've worked with.
Yeah.
I still see people, I still talk to people.
Yeah.
But you can see why it's very transient, very transactional. Oh, I've done 18 months here, I can go and get a job somewhere else. It doesn't really matter, because you're just on the end of the end of a Zoom call kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can sort of see why it is that the up and coming sort of set of employees, and it's not everyone, and I'm not disparaging any
No.
class of people, age of people, whatever. But
Yeah.
you can see how it's only going to get worse.
Oh, totally. I mean, culture. I mean, how do you take all the things you've learned and actually create a culture like that?
It's difficult. Honestly, it's difficult. And it's difficult in coming into any business. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, it doesn't really matter. I think if you Autologics had been around for 7-8 years by the time I joined. It had its own culture, it had its own sort of environment and way of working, and I saw opportunities to make things a little bit better. So you go about making those things a little bit better, but you got to take people on a journey. You've got to make sure that you got to sell the dream. Basically, you got to take people on that journey, and you can't just sort of sit there. And I see this happening a lot, and it happened to me at a stage at High Q. I won't mention names or anything else, but somebody came in to sort of help support the next stage of the business. But the guy was a bellend, and he wasn't very good at articulating how he wanted to work, or the importance of it, or why it was better than the way it was before. And he didn't take anyone on a journey, and he ultimately didn't last very long in the business. But he disrupted the business, and he sort of like, this is the way of working. This is how it's going to work. This is how we're going to succeed. Our customers didn't like it. Our team didn't like it. And that's not to say that we were sort of fickle and a bit delicate and a bit sort of, oh no, he's telling us what to do kind of scenario. He just didn't try and take us on a journey. So I think that's the first bit. You've got to realize that if you're trying to implement change, do it gradually, do it in a way that is transparent, communicate with the team, make sure they understand why they might need to change their working practices, or why they might need to do something a little bit different. And I think that then starts to build trust. You're a new person in an organization. You're the outsider. So you've got to quickly gain their trust. So you've got to show quick wins. You've got to show that the mechanisms and the things that you believe in are good for them and good for the customers. And if you've got happy customers, then your life's going to be a little bit easier. So I think that's the whole communication and transparency is really key. I don't know. We catch up. So our UK team catches up once every 8 weeks, sometimes every 12 weeks, depending on schedules and holidays and everything else. We're only a small team, like 12 people. But we talk to each other almost every day. Or we have stand-ups, like company-wide stand-ups and stuff. So it's sort of, we try and keep that connected sort of environment going. And I think I'm sort of lucky where we are. My team sit across quite a lot of customer and pre-customer, so prospect kind of activities. So I'm engaged with lots of different people, from marketing, sales, customer success, support, on a regular basis. But it's sort of taking the time to then connect with the teams that you don't always connect with on a weekly basis, like product or whatever it might be. And so making sure that they're still around, happy, and pushing on, even though you're not directly responsible for those areas of the business. And again, I try to do that. I don't do it often enough, but that's sort of one of the things that you sort of in my head, I go, right, must connect with product a bit more, must do this. But yeah, culture is a really tricky one, particularly in this sort of fully remote kind of environment.
It is. I mean, it's funny because I mean I remember when I got started in professional services myself, working in an accounting firm as as a 22-year-old, and I learned a lot of I guess communication skills from a receptionist. That you go, you collect the mail. There was this whole. It felt like it was actually it felt like it was a village raising me, so to speak. Like there's all these people in there who gave me bits of information and things like that. And it was actually very much face to face. It was very much in person sort of thing. And I think the whole remote side of things, remote's great. I mean, it's excellent. I mean, you can if people that manage it well, it's fantastic. But it's hard culturally speaking. It's hard to actually take a culture, maintain a culture, and not be transactional. I mean, when people actually say, "Let's catch up for a call," well, what's the agenda versus bumping into someone in the office and having a bit of a chat, like a 5-minute chat.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's the balance, isn't it? You got to try and remove that transactional nature from your engagements. I mean, obviously there are things you've got to do. There are meetings you've got to have. But ultimately, how do you recreate that water cooler moment? But it's interesting. You said sort of you were raised by a village type thing. There's probably one, maybe two, sometimes three people in every organization, every environment I've worked in that I look at that has had a positive impact on the way I do stuff. And it's really weird. I think one of them, he's no longer with us, but he was my manager at the Firkin back all those years ago. I used to have long curtains down here, and
My goodness, but
he I know
Baywatch
sort of,
style.
yeah, a little bit chunkier than Baywatch, but
Ben
Baywatch.
Hasselhoff.
But but there was the manager there. He was an Aussie. He basically created this idea in me that you could work hard and play hard and do both well, and sort of really fostered that idea that you're a team. And again, I think I worked with him for 5 months, you know what I mean? Not a very long period of time, but it was quite intense. And so you pick up mannerisms and ways of working, and sort of he was a great one for making sure that people didn't pick up tabs and in lock-ins and stuff like that. You go, right, there you go, here's a couple of beers, it's fine. The brewery aren't going to find out. I mean, they probably did, but it's just one of those things that you start to look at how different parts of your life, personal and sort of professional, impact how you act, what you do, and what that looks like.
It's interesting, Ben. A question for you: if there was one piece of advice you can give people that are getting started in the legal technology sort of space, or even technology, I guess, what would it be?
Jesus, just one. I think that everyone's got a different why. Okay. And some people it's I'm building this thing because I want to exit. Some people it's I want to build a culture. Some people it's I want to build the best product that does X. Some people they just want to be part of a community, or they want to drive something forward. I think do what's right for you. Don't there's thousands of textbooks. You could listen to this podcast, and there's a ton of advice, but I think do what makes you happy, do what makes you content, do what fulfills you, and then it might take a little bit longer, but you'll find yourself in a place whereby you've created an environment that allows you that work-life balance. Because I think that the most important thing is sort of everyone goes to work and everyone typically, and everyone sort of gets paid, and everyone has a personal life, and everyone's doing it for another reason. And it's like, I think that the most important thing is finding out what your professional sort of thing is, and make sure you're just focusing on your home stuff. Make sure you sort of you're I mean, everyone's got kids. Everyone turns into a taxi service at some point in time, and everyone does stuff. But sort of you're doing that because you're trying to create an environment where they can learn and you can help. But ultimately, it's sort of you can only really do that well if you're happy at work. And so find something that really fulfills you. I guess it's not really advice. It's not going to give you an answer into what that is, but everyone's slightly different. So, yeah.
No, I think it's really important. I think, and just sort of, I guess, rounding off. I mean, it's, I have to say, Ben, that it's. I mean, when you look at your LinkedIn profile, I mean, the first things you've got on your profile is you've got this beautiful balance between family, and work, and as your identity and things. And I think that's actually a really important thing for people to realize. It is actually, life has to be a balance. And it is about work-life balance. It is about family. It's about all those important things. Yeah,
no, and I think that sort of, and work-life balance means different things to different people. It really does. And there's sort of some people operate in different ways to me, different ways to you, and it's sort of that we all have our challenges, the things that make us happy, the things that we sort of thrive around. And I think the one thing for me is that you work hard, but you work hard to make sure that your kids can choose a stupidly expensive pair of football boots, or you can take them on that trip, or you can do this, or you can take time out. And I think the thing that's been really good, and you talked about it, sort of remote is hard, but actually, given the right environment, remote creates a tremendous amount of opportunity to further your work-life balance. And it's sort of being able to nip out to sports day for 2 hours of an afternoon or something like that, where you'd probably go, right, can I, like pre-COVID, you'd go, I'll talk to my manager, can I leave early on the Wednesday because I've got to do this? And it's like, actually, I'm going to walk 10 minutes to go and watch my kid run 100 meters, and then I'm going to come back to the desk. Is that all right? And there are some organizations that say no, but you know what I mean, that they're bad places. So you got greater opportunity to be more present, I think.
Ben, just for our listeners and audience who interested in finding more about, I guess, if are you open to, I guess, people asking more about your career, number one, and number two, in terms of the AutoLogix product set, finding out more about that and watch how you work with other clients. I guess we'll put some contact details into the podcast so people can reach out to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Happy to make more connections. And sort of if you want to chat about my career, then great. I don't know. It's been a bit of a whirlwind.
I think you've been a fantastic mentor to a lot of people. I think there's been a lot of people that you've actually helped and mentored along the way. And I think there's a lot of value there from point of view of just knowing people like yourself who've actually worked your way through and actually found some of the tricks and traps of doing the career things you've done.
Well, I mean, thank you. I sort of, it's one of those things that you try and just be an open book, really. And that's all I've tried to be, with customers, with employees, with past employees, with friends. And I think that's the one thing that you sort of, coming out of the 20 years in legal or whatever it is, maybe a bit longer, I've made friends. You make friends, and sort of, it's one of those things. It's sort of, you talk to my 16-year-old and goes, he's got like 6 friends. He's got other people that he knows, but he's got 6 friends. And it's like, I could probably call, I don't know, 200 friends in legal tech, you know Easily. What I mean? In law firms. And you sort of, they're friends. They might not call me friends, but, I think of them as a friend because I would stop and say hello to them, and I would buy them a beer, or I'd buy them a coffee or whatever. And you wouldn't even think twice about it. And that's what this kind of environment creates. So yeah, cool.
Brilliant. Ben, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much. And mate, brilliant to catch up as always. I'm looking forward to actually having a beer with you either in Oz, if we can get somebody to actually to look at Autologics in Australia, or the
Let's
UK.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
definitely. Well, as soon as we can, mate, that'll be great to catch up.
brilliant.
So thank you very much for your time, bud, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Thanks, Ben.
Peace. Take it easy.
See ya.